Pate told authorities that Ricky was to blame. He said, "Who goes drinking in the woods with someone who looks like this?"
Some criminals defy humanity, driven by greed and violence that shatter lives. These gang members' horrific acts, like Pedro Espinoza's senseless murder and Brandon Giffin's chilling crimes, expose the depths of cruelty. Prepare to be stunned. Let's begin.
We begin tonight with the death sentence for a gang member who killed a high school football player because he carried a red backpack. The murder of Jamiel Shaw shocked the community.
In the heart of Los Angeles in March 2008, a tragic incident occurred in Los Angeles involving Jamiel Shaw II, a 17-year-old high school athlete with a bright future. Shaw, a standout running back with aspirations of playing college football, became the victim of a senseless act of violence. Pedro Espinoza, a 23-year-old gang member, targeted Shaw because he mistakenly believed that Shaw's red Spider-Man backpack signified a connection to a rival gang. This tragic misunderstanding ultimately led to Shaw's untimely death. Jamiel Shaw II was walking home in Arlington Heights when he was ambushed by Espinoza, a member of the 18th Street Gang. Despite Shaw's lack of gang involvement, Espinoza targeted him, wrongly associating the red color of his backpack with gang activity. Espinoza, who had been released from jail just a day prior, executed Shaw in cold blood, leaving him defenseless and fatally wounded. The courtroom trial painted a chilling picture. Evidence showed Espinoza's premeditated intent, his lack of remorse, smiling on his sentence and even boasting about the crime afterwards. The judge emphasized Espinoza's indifference, stating, "The defendant executed the victim as he lay on the ground defenseless." Shaw's parents, devastated by the loss, bravely faced the courtroom, recounting their son's bright future and the void his death had left in their lives.
The people have submitted paperwork, and the defense is submitting on it.
The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence as Judge Ronald H. Rose prepared to announce the verdict. Pedro Espinoza's case had been a difficult one, marked by gang violence that had taken the lives of innocent people. Espinoza, known for his ties to a dangerous gang, stood with his head slightly down, listening as the judge's voice filled the room. His defense team had fought hard, claiming that the trial wasn't fair. They pointed to mistakes in the process and argued that there wasn't enough solid evidence. They said Espinoza hadn't been given a fair chance to defend himself. However, the prosecution presented strong evidence, showing Espinoza's involvement in the violent acts. Pedro's cousin also tried to stand up for his brother in the courtroom.
Have you ever claimed a gang to anybody?
No, sir.
You ever claimed 18th Street to Officer Winston Lee of the Los Angeles Police Department?
No, sir.
After carefully considering everything, Judge Rose gave his ruling. Espinoza was sentenced to death. Jamiel Shaw's family was shattered but resolute in honoring his memory. His mother, Anita, serving in Iraq at the time of his death, struggled to forgive, saying, "I'm not that strong of a person." His father, Jamiel Shaw Sr., vowed to protect their younger son, Shaw's brother Thomas. A letter for his brother makes everyone emotional. "I ran down there and saw the day after you murdered him. I saw his blood." Shaw's legacy as a gifted athlete with dreams of greatness remains a haunting reminder of the lives lost to senseless violence, leaving behind a legacy of loss and remembrance.
Then I ran down there and saw the day after you murdered him. I saw blood.
Pedro Espinoza's murder of Jamiel Shaw II broke a family's heart, but the story doesn't end there. The next case is just as horrifying, as who caused fear in Los Angeles with his violent crimes.
Gang leader described by police as a thrill killer is headed for death row at San Quentin.
Timothy Joseph McGee, born on April 27, 1973, is a notorious gang member from Los Angeles, California, known for his chilling reign of violence. As a member of the Tunerville Rifa 13 gang, McGee was responsible for at least 12 murders between 1997 and 2001, and convicted for 3 of them. His crimes, described as ruthless and calculated, earned him a place among California's wildest killers in history. McGee's criminal history began in the 1990s when he targeted rivals, law enforcement, and even innocent bystanders to maintain his gang's dominance in the substance trade. In the early morning of November 9, 2001, Timothy McGee and Eduardo Limpy Rodriguez drove through Atwater Village, looking for revenge after a friend's death. They saw Dwayne Natividad's SUV and attacked without warning, firing many shots. Natividad survived, but his girlfriend, Marjorie Mendoza, was killed. In July 2000, McGee was said to have planned a dangerous ambush on LAPD officers during a car chase, using police radios and working with his gang. Between 1994 and 2000, McGee alternated between incarceration and parole. During his parole periods, he killed 3 people, shot 2 LAPD officers, and attempted several other murders. After his arrest in 2003 for multiple homicides, McGee faced charges that outlined the terror he brought to Atwater Village. McGee's trial began on September 27, 2007. In court, prosecutors painted McGee as a thrill killer who acted with cold-blooded precision. Evidence included incriminating hip-hop lyrics where he compared himself to infamous figures like Freddy Krueger and Jesse James. Despite the fear McGee inspired, witnesses, including former gang members and accomplices, testified against him, though many changed their stories under pressure. The jury deliberated for a week and found McGee guilty of 3 murders and 4 attempted murders, though he was acquitted in 2 attempted murder cases due to unreliable witness testimonies.
He continued, McGee is a committed killer and an obvious danger to society. McGee showed no emotion. McGee now resides on death row in San Quentin State Prison.
In October 2007, McGee was eligible for the death penalty due to multiple murder convictions and his role in advancing gang activities. After deliberations, a jury deadlocked on his sentence, leading to a retrial. By August 2008, a second jury unanimously sentenced McGee to death. In addition to the death sentence, McGee received multiple life sentences for attempted murders and his involvement in a violent 2005 prison riot. However, California's 2019 moratorium on executions means McGee currently serves life without parole. His cold demeanor, lack of remorse, smiling and laughing face during trial highlighted the depths of his ruthlessness. The trial's outcome brought some measure of justice, though the scars of his actions remain. Timothy Joseph McGee caused a lot of violence and pain, but the video doesn't end there. Next is Victor Rodas, who was involved in the tragic murder of a young person by the MS-13 gang.
New at noon, we are learning more about the alleged gang killing of a Lynchburg teen. Victor Rodas is one of 6 people charged in connection to Raymond Wood's death. 17-year-old's body was found in Bedford County in March of last year.
In 2017, a tragic incident shook Bedford County, Virginia, when 17-year-old Raymond Wood was found murdered. His body had been stabbed 29 times in a planned attack connected to the violent MS-13 gang. The case exposed a chilling story of gang violence and the heartbreaking loss of a young life. Among those involved, Victor Rodas was identified as a key figure in the crime. Rodas, a suspected MS-13 gang member, was one of 6 people charged with Wood's death. The court heard that Wood had been kidnapped and, during the car ride to where he was killed, he cried out for his mother. This detail was revealed by another person involved in the case who testified during the trial. Rodas was accused of helping plan and carry out the murder, following orders from the gang, which he feared disobeying. In October 2023, after a 4-day trial, a jury looked at more than 100 pieces of evidence. This included testimonies from other gang members, gang-related symbols found in Rodas's notebook, and proof that he knew about the knife used to kill Wood. Rodas's lawyer argued that he didn't plan to kill Wood and was only following orders because he feared the gang would harm him or his family. But the evidence showed otherwise. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and being part of a gang. Judge James Updike spoke firmly as he sentenced Rodas to 55 years in prison, 35 years for murder, 10 years for kidnapping, and 10 years for being part of a gang. Rodas stayed calm and showed no emotion as he heard his punishment. The sound of the gavel ended the trial, and the courtroom fell silent. Rodas's story had reached its end, but the rest of the case was far from over. Raymond's mother said in an interview that his final words are, "I love you." Those are the last words he said to me that afternoon.
Raymond's mother only has pictures to scroll through, and the final words, "I love you," embedded in her memory.
Those were the last words that he said to me that afternoon.
Wood's mother took the stand, her voice shaking as she told her story. She said that on the night her son was taken, she found some of his things in the yard, including his cell phone. She also found a black knit ski mask that didn't belong to her son. With tears in her eyes, she looked at the jurors and talked about her son's love for his family. His one passion that he loved most was spending time with family, she said, her words filled with sadness over the life lost too soon. The trial was emotional, especially when Raymond Wood's mother, Marjorie Stagno, starts crying in the court. Rodas showed no remorse for his act. Victor Rodas's part in Raymond's murder shows the fear gangs can create, while David Adam Pate's killings done for pleasure are even more frightening.
State versus David Adam Pate, having pled guilty to murder, sentenced court as he be committed to the State Department of Corrections for a determined term of life.
David Adam Pate, a man with a scary look and many tattoos, including the word Satan on his face, shocked everyone with his terrible actions. In October 2013, he met Ricky James, a man he barely knew, and took him into the woods. There, Pate brutally killed him. The crime horrified the Lancaster community, especially when children playing nearby found James's decomposed body hidden under some bushes. At 25 years old, Pate already had a criminal record for burglary and other crimes since he was a teenager. But this murder was more horrifying than anything he'd done before. He lured James into the woods with wine and then stabbed him 39 times using a butcher knife. The kind he said reminded him of the movie Halloween. His shocking reason? He just wanted to do it. In a chilling confession to his mother, Pate admitted that he enjoyed it and even thought about killing again. When police searched his home, they found over 20 knives and masks. DNA evidence tied him to the crime scene, and witnesses said he was covered in blood afterward. Pate tried to destroy the evidence by burning his clothes, but it was clear that he had planned the crime without any remorse. The courtroom fell silent as the chilling details of the murder unfolded. In a recorded confession, Pate revealed the gruesome steps he took after killing James. His voice, void of remorse, described how he used a rope to bind James's lifeless body from neck to ankles. He dragged the body towards a nearby creek, intending to dispose of it. But exhaustion overtook him, and he abandoned the task halfway through. The horror didn't end there. The next day, sobered but still haunted, Pate returned to the scene. He covered James's body, not out of guilt or regret, but out of a chilling self-awareness. He admitted he was afraid of his own impulses, worried that the sight of James might spark an uncontrollable desire to kill again. The jury sat frozen, their faces reflecting a mix of horror and confusion. Even the legal teams exchanged uneasy glances, grappling with the jarring contrast between Pate's calm demeanor and the horrifying acts he described so casually. During the trial, the full horror of the murder became clear. In a recorded confession, Pate described tying James with rope from his neck to his ankles so he could drag the body to a creek, and how he pushed his body. However, he was too drunk and tired to finish the job. He even admitted going back the next day to cover James's body, worried that he might feel the urge to kill someone else. In court, James's family expressed their grief and anger. His brother said, "He says God is the avengers. Thank God," and showed anger in the courtroom, hoping Pate would suffer in prison. Prosecutors called Pate evil and said he enjoyed killing, making him a threat to society. Even experienced detectives said they had never dealt with such a cold and emotionless killer. When it came time for sentencing, Pate showed no emotion. He had already pleaded guilty to avoid a trial, but couldn't avoid the maximum punishment. Judge Dan Hall called the murder senseless, remorseless, and emotionless, and sentenced Pate to life in prison without parole.
Charge of murder. You understand what you're charged with?
Yes, sir.
And you understand that murder carries a minimum sentence of 30 years.
Pate's lawyer asked for mercy because Pate had admitted guilt, but the judge decided his crime was so cruel that he deserved the harshest penalty. For James's family, the pain of losing their loved one was immense. While they were relieved that justice was served, they knew it could never bring James back. As for Pate, his life sentence ensured he would never harm anyone else again. But the memory of his brutal crime will never be forgotten. David Adam Pate's ruthless murder of Ricky James shocked many, followed by Brandon Griffin's gang crimes, earning him nearly 50 years in prison.
As part of an attempted second-degree murder charge in May of last year, Brandon Giffin is accused of giving a gun to John Gibo.
In a courtroom on Monday, Brandon Giffin, a man known as the leader of a violent gang called the Squad, was sentenced to nearly 50 years in prison. The case came after a 4-week trial where Giffin was found guilty of 53 charges that painted a picture of a dangerous and ruthless criminal. Brandon Giffin was accused of orchestrating a series of shootings across Manchester. The Squad, led by Griffin, used intimidation and violence to control the illegal substance trade in the city. Prosecutors claimed Griffin was a man driven by greed and power, willing to put the lives of many at risk in order to increase his criminal empire. He was found guilty of ordering 11 shootings, causing widespread fear and outrage in the community. During the trial, the prosecution presented a strong case, highlighting the ruthless nature of Griffin's crimes. Prosecutor Nicole Schultz-Price argued that Griffin was solely motivated by money and power, relentlessly expanding his substance territory. The defense, however, maintained Griffin's innocence, and his lawyer, Brian Lee, stated that the state's request for a 277-year sentence was inappropriate, as Griffin would appeal the convictions. Despite the defense's arguments, the judge sentenced Griffin to 48.5 years in prison. This sentence was a direct result of his leadership in the Squad and the violence that came with it. Griffin's sentence would start immediately, ensuring that he would face the consequences of his actions. His sister, Diamond Fowler, spoke before the court, acknowledging that Griffin had to face his own consequences, but hoping that he wouldn't be blamed for the actions of others.
Brandon Giffin is accused of leading a gang called the Squad in Manchester, a group that prosecutors say used intimidation and violence to control the flow of illegal drugs in the city.
As the judge announced the lengthy prison sentence, Griffin sat quietly, his face betraying no emotion, and he kept turning back to look. The courtroom, however, was far from calm. His sister's heartfelt words added a deeply emotional layer, revealing the tangled web of love and despair within their family. For the victims and the city of Manchester, the sentencing marked a step toward justice. Yet, beneath the surface, the wounds of violence and loss lingered, leaving a lasting impact on the community, a reminder that even justice cannot erase the pain of the past. Brandon Griffin's orchestrated violence left a city gripped by fear, but his sentencing marks the end of his violent reign. If you thought Brandon Griffin's case was chilling, wait until you hear about Jamiel Martinez Estrella, a brutal act of violence so shocking it sent ripples across the nation.
All of these men, and I say men, took part in one of the most disturbing murders that this city and this nation has ever seen.
Jamiel Martinez Estrella is being charged with murder in the Bronx, New York. On June 20th, 2018, Jamiel Martinez, Manuel Rivera, Jose Muniz, Elvin Garcia, and Antonio Santiago killed 15-year-old Lisandro Jr. Guzman Feliz after slashing him in the neck. These 5 men and 8 other members belong to a ruthless and feared Dominican gang called the Trinitarios. Reports showed that Jr. had gone to meet a friend a few blocks away from his home in the Bronx when cars suddenly pulled up beside him. The gang members had been taunting Jr. as he was walking down the road, but he ignored them because he had nothing to do with them. The gang thought that Jr. belonged to a rival gang and chased him down the road. When Jr. noticed he was being followed, he ran afterwards and made it 5 blocks from his house before hiding in a bodega. CCTV footage from the store showed Jr., desperate to hide from those chasing him, trying to jump behind the counter. However, the owner thought he was being robbed and tried to stop him from doing so. Eventually, the store owner noticed that Jr. was very scared before letting him hide behind the counter. Jr. managed to jump eventually, but he was spotted by one of the gang members. The gangster who had seen him ran out to call the others, and chaos broke out in the store. Jr. was dragged out of the store by the gang members to the front of the street. What you're about to see will shock you. The 5 men mentioned at the beginning of this case took turns stabbing the 15-year-old with hunting knives and machetes. The gang members stabbed Jr. multiple times, with Jamiel slicing his neck, where Jr. ended up bleeding to death. The men left Jr. on the street and escaped in a getaway car. After the gang members left, Lisandro Jr., who was still alive, managed to walk into the shop with blood from his neck. He was sent away by the store owner, and when he got outside, Lisandro started gesturing to onlookers and people passing by to call 911. However, no one did, so he started to run towards St. Barnabas Hospital, which was a block away. Unfortunately, Lisandro only made it to the entrance before collapsing. While a few passerby tried to help him, residents of the Bronx who knew Jr. saw him covered in stab wounds and rushed to help him. Some of them held clothes to his wounds, while others ran into the hospital to ask for help. Jr. passed away 20 minutes later because of the stab wound Jamiel had delivered to his neck. From the CCTV footage that showed the murder, police soon arrested these men before charging them with murder. The murder of Jr. and the release of the CCTV footage caused widespread outrage in New York, leading to the Justice for Jr. movement, where protesters asked that the murderers be punished accordingly. The footage of the murder was posted on Instagram and Twitter, and police tip lines received hundreds of calls from people who helped to identify the suspects. The graphic video of the killing was shared over 100,000 times. During the trial of these men, another member of the gang, Kevin Alvarez, was brought in to testify against them. Alvarez was part of the men who dragged Jr. out of the store, and he identified the others after he was arrested. He agreed to testify against them in exchange for a plea deal, as he was charged with conspiracy to murder. Jr.'s sister eventually stated that the reason the gang members had targeted Jr. was not because they thought he was a member of a rival gang. The incident started after a video containing explicit content showing a gang member's sister, Stephanie Estacio, and her boyfriend, Irving Ozuna. To protect her boyfriend, Stephanie lied and told her brother that the male in the video was Lisandro, because he looked similar to Irving. She was also allegedly the one who lured Junior out that night under the guise that she needed to borrow some money. The men were convicted for this horrific murder, and at their sentencing, they showed no remorse for their actions. During the trial sessions, these men made gang signs and shouted gang slogans, showing no respect for the victim or his family. John Ike was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The other men, besides Manuel Rivera, were sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Rivera was slapped with a 23-year to life sentence. During their sentencing, some of the men pretended to show signs of remorse, but were said to be smirking when they thought no one was watching. The murder of Lisandro Guzman Feliz brought a lot of sorrow to the Bronx and beyond. The store owner, who sent Junior out after he saw that he was injured, told the news that his mother had suffered a heart attack and died after watching the footage. In honor of Lisandro's ambitions to become a detective, the NYPD established a scholarship in his name, and the street where he was murdered was renamed to Lisandro Jr. Guzman Feliz Way. Celebrities who had grown up in the Bronx also honored the memory of Lisandro. In 2023, however, John Ike was resentenced because his lawyer was able to prove that he had attacked without the intent of torturing or taking pleasure in killing Lisandro. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, meaning he gets to walk free after serving 25 years in prison. The brutality of this murder was justified by a false belief that the victim was a gang member. But how does it compare to David Parga's chilling act, murdering an innocent man with no gang ties?
To you specifically, I want to say sorry to what happened to your son. I know the pain you're feeling. My mom comes to see me, she cries because what's happening to me, and I could only imagine what you're going through. You lost your son.
On October 29, 2006, 27-year-old Leland Washington was leaving a Halloween party after he had been invited by some of his friends. He was reportedly asked to leave because most of the partygoers were gang members. Washington had returned to the party with a group after he was kicked out. As he was leaving, David Parga, a member of the La Habra street gang, walked up to Leland and shot with a .22 caliber pistol. David had shot him multiple times without any form of provocation. David and his gang felt that Washington was disrespectful to them because he had returned to the party. Leland's friends put him in their car before driving to UCI Medical Center in California, where he was pronounced dead. Leland Washington was 1 semester away from graduating with an accounting and business administration degree at California State University. He was not in a gang and had no gang affiliations. David Parga was arrested and charged with felony murder. Parga represented himself in court and was found guilty of second-degree murder. During sentencing, Leland Washington's family gave their impact statements in court. Leland's brother talked about how he found the grief of losing his brother too much to handle.
Days that the grief is so much that I just kind of muddle through the day. You have to understand who he was. He was such a great person, and the way that he died, he did not deserve that at all.
Leland's sister also talked about how much emptiness was left behind by her brother's murder. She said, "Halloween weekend will never be the same for us. It's ironic that we are here today to sentence the man who murdered my brother. It is not fair that his life was taken away by a non-productive member of society." Leland Washington's mother told the court that David and Leland may have been friends if they had known each other. She said, "I think if Mr. Parga had ever known him, he couldn't have been anything but a friend to him. He couldn't have found any other way but to make him a friend." Parga was allowed to speak to the victim's family, and he seemed to show remorse for his actions. Parga apologized for senselessly murdering Leland Washington. The judge in his final sentencing called Parga a coward because he had shot Leland for no obvious reason. In 2013, Parga was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison for the murder of 27-year-old Leland Washington. While David Parga apologized and showed remorse for his actions, what do we say about a convict who begs people not to be like him?
The life that we was living, being in gangs and all that other stuff, it ain't worth 16 years or a death, because eventually you be put in a situation and there's severe consequences that come with that.
This is Tariq Jackson, who is on trial for murder in Michigan. On July 12, 2015, 16-year-old Tariq Jackson allegedly pulled out a gun and opened fire in public after a fight broke out between rival Ypsilanti gangs in 2015. One of the bullets that Tariq had shot hit 20-year-old Keandre Duff in the head, killing him instantly. Tariq was charged with open murder, armed robbery, receiving and concealing a stolen firearm, 3 counts of felony firearm, and 11 counts of perjury. However, shortly before he was set to go on trial, he confessed to second-degree murder. This murder was not the first time Tariq committed a crime because he had a lengthy criminal history. In 2012, he was placed on probation as a minor for a first-degree home invasion. He was also placed on probation for a third-degree home invasion in August 2014, before being arrested for carrying a concealed weapon a few months later. He was eventually sentenced, and it was an emotional day for everyone there. The mother of the victim gave an impact statement.
Our whole world was turned upside down from that point. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because that when our children make these decisions out here.
Keandre Duff's mother blamed the gang culture the men found themselves in. She addressed Tariq directly as she delivered her statement. She said, "Our whole world was turned upside down. Our young men are lost out there. I don't want to see another young man go behind bars." Duff's mother also told Tariq that she forgave him and hoped he found salvation. Keandre Duff had previously been charged with the murder of 17-year-old Keon Washington. The charges against him were later dropped due to a lack of sufficient evidence to charge him. Tariq eventually had his chance to address the court, as he apologized for his actions, showing remorse and obvious regret for his actions.
First off, I just want to say sorry to the family of the victim. I wish the situation would have played out like that. I never thought that my choices and decisions would have affected so many people. No mother deserves to bury her son, and no mother deserves to see her son change. My bad choice led to a lose-lose situation for me, my family, and the family of the victim.
Tariq went on to warn other gang members, telling them to learn from him, because what they were doing wasn't worth the consequences. He warned his brother and friends who were involved with gangs to stop so they didn't end up like him. Tariq Jackson was sentenced to 17 to 40 years in prison for the murder of 20-year-old Keandre Duff. He is currently serving his sentence at the G. Robert Cotton Correctional Facility. Unlike Tariq Jackson, Luis Bracamontes showed no remorse in court. Instead, he vowed to kill again if given the chance.
Be silent. Be silent.
I will break out soon and I will kill more.
On October 24, 2014, Luis Bracamontes, an illegal immigrant from Mexico and substance dealer, murdered 2 police officers and severely injured another in Northern California. Luis fatally shot a sheriff's deputy named Danny Oliver of the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department because the officer had been examining Luis's car. After killing Oliver, Luis stole a car and fled to another county where he shot 2 other officers, killing Detective Michael Davis of the Placer County Sheriff's Department. Before he added the brutal murder of these 2 officers to his list, Luis had already gotten on the bad side of the law multiple times. He was an illegal immigrant and had already been deported twice. In 1997, Bracamontes was arrested in Arizona because he had been selling narcotics. The authorities later found out that he was an illegal immigrant and Bracamontes was deported. He was, however, arrested again for selling substances in 1998. Undercover police officers had bought small amounts of illegal substances from Bracamontes before arresting him in Phoenix. He was released only to be arrested and deported to Mexico in 2001. Bracamontes had illegally migrated back to America again, and at the time he committed the murders, he was using the name Marcelo Marquez. After he shot and killed the 2 police officers, Bracamontes went on the run. Luis stole several cars to escape the police, and an extensive manhunt was launched to find him. He was eventually taken into custody, and his court hearings lasted about 4 years, due to his erratic and unpredictable behavior, which will be covered later. The news of the murder became widespread, especially since it had happened around the time that the Obama administration updated immigration policies, which allowed Bracamontes to stay in America that long without being deported. In 2017, Donald Trump invited the widows of the officers Bracamontes murdered to a joint Congress. The motive for this was not revealed until 2018, a week before the midterm elections. Donald Trump's administration ran an ad which linked Bracamontes and the murders to the Democrats. The ad accused Democrats of allowing dangerous immigrants into the United States. This ad was heavily criticized and condemned by both party members across the country. A Republican senator called the ad sickening and said it was a new low in campaigning. Amidst the nationwide outrage over the ad, Bracamontes' hearing had to be rescheduled multiple times until 2018 when he was finally sentenced. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. Luis initially pleaded not guilty, but he could not keep the facade on any longer and revealed his true colors in the courtroom. His actions were despicable.
Ladies and gentlemen, please step out of the hallway. Dead.
Bracamontes kept on promising to kill more police officers when he broke out of prison as the procedure went on. It was later revealed by one of the earlier sheriffs who had arrested him that Bracamontes held severe hate for the legal system and police officers. Eventually, Bracamontes admitted to murdering the two officers. He told the court that he saw no point in trying to prove whether he did it or not when all the facts pointed to him being the killer. At this point, his attorney gave up defending him and said the same thing to the court. It was no shock that Bracamontes was found guilty.
Mr. Bracamontes is responsible for the deaths of both Deputy Danny Oliver and Detective Mike Davis.
After hearing he was sentenced to death, he cheered audibly when his sentence was announced and smiled before his behavior became more unsettling. He blew kisses, smiled, and clapped towards the victims' families. Finally, as he was being led away, he made a chilling threat for the court to hear. However, it seems like Bracamontes will never get the chance to do as he threatened, because he was moved to death row in Quentin State Prison a few weeks after his sentencing. Luis Bracamontes vowed to kill more, but David Moses brought a whole new meaning to the term no remorse.
A chuckle, a laugh, and yawn after yawn, David Moses acted strangely at his sentencing this morning.
In April 2010, 17-year-old David Moses and two girls entered the home of 81-year-old Dorothy Session in California with the intent of robbing the home. David Moses and the two girls, 17-year-old Angelique Nash and 15-year-old Katila Nash, had planned to rob the house because they thought no one was around. Angelique was left outside to be the stakeout, while David and Katila broke into the house. Upon finding out that someone was in the house, David Moses did the most shocking thing. As Dorothy resisted, Moses beat her mercilessly until she died. Katila also watched as David pummeled Dorothy to death. The police found Dorothy dead and her body was riddled with injuries. She had a broken nose, missing teeth, black eyes, and cuts to her mouth and face. Moses was eventually found and arrested before he was finally convicted of first-degree murder 2 years later when he turned 19. The two sisters were arrested as well, and they were sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. It was later revealed that Moses grew up without a father figure, and he was raised by his mother until he was 12 years old. He became a ward of the court and was eventually bounced between group homes due to his erratic and violent behavior toward the other children. While Moses was in the group home, he committed multiple crimes including carjacking and burglary, which led to the murder of Dorothy Session. He was eventually brought to court in 2012. In court, Moses' behavior was shocking to the core. He showed no remorse for his actions and laughed throughout the session. In an attempt to show that he found the procedure boring, Moses yawned and put his head on the table, mimicking falling asleep. At some point, Moses also licked his lips to show that he didn't care and that he didn't believe that anything was wrong. Some online participants assumed that Moses behaved that way because he thought he'd be protected by juvenile court laws, no matter what he did in court.
The chuckle, a laugh, and yawn after yawn, David Moses acted strangely at his sentencing this morning.
David completely fell asleep at some point and didn't care for anything that was going on. The prosecutor said it seemed to him that Moses was enjoying the trial and felt like it was a game. Despite these actions and how he showed no remorse, his attorney asked the judge to consider including the possibility of parole in his sentencing. However, the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. David showed no reaction and merely licked his lips as he was escorted out. David's case remained closed until 8 years later, when it looked like things were going to change for David. A change in law led Moses to be resentenced. He was tried under juvenile conditions because of how old he was when he murdered Dorothy. He was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2020 because he showed no form of change since he was sent to prison and still showed no remorse for his actions for the brutal murder of Dorothy Session. During his resentencing, David remained nonchalant, but this time he had no smile on his face and just stood in defiance, as he still had no regard for the court. David Moses didn't get a second chance, but Brandon Spencer still has a petition 10 years later to set him free.
Eligibility is 15 years plus 25 years of life in accordance with Penal Code Section 12022.3D. This is to be concurrent with the
On October 31st, 2012, 19-year-old Brandon Spencer got involved in a shootout with a rival gang at a Halloween party on the University of Southern California campus. As a result of the shooting, 4 people were wounded, and the area descended into mayhem. While many students ran away from the shooting, Spencer reportedly ran with the students before he was caught. Brandon was charged with 4 counts of attempted murder. It was revealed in court that shots had been fired into the crowd in retaliation at another gang member. In 2014, Brandon went to trial. Despite the fact that all the people called to testify in the case said that Brandon could not have been the shooter because he was never involved in any kind of gang. The court denied him a lawyer and charged him on a witness's testimony and no evidence that linked him to the shooting.
I'm sorry for what happened, Your Honor, but I came to life in prison. And I'm not a bad person, but I made mistakes. But I'm not just some gangbanger that she tried to portray me as.
Spencer kept on insisting that he was innocent and kept on pleading for mercy because he admitted to making mistakes. However, the jury refused to take any other thing into account besides the fact that Brandon had shot into an open crowd, even though he didn't murder anyone. In under 3 hours at trial, the jury found Spencer guilty of all charges, and he was sentenced to 40 years in prison. In response, the 19-year-old broke down as the judge showed no ounce of mercy.
Parole eligibility is 15 years plus 25 years to life in accordance with Penal Code Section 12022.3D. This is to be concurrent with the
Spencer banged his head on the table twice and cried until he was escorted out. In 2021, however, a podcast was released on the story of Spencer, and his case garnered attention once again. The podcast claimed that Brandon had not shot into the crowd and was only celebrating Halloween with his girlfriend at the University of Southern California. However, the jury portrayed him as a gangbanger, and the testimony of the star witness was all that was used to convict him. The podcast also revealed that Spencer had been shot in the stomach outside a restaurant, and the USC shooting was retaliation, a mistake that Spencer regretted. The star witness recanted their testimony after the investigation revealed that the witness who had been brought in to testify against Spencer was coerced because he had been arrested for an unrelated crime. The prosecution reportedly promised to get the witnesses' charges dropped if they testified that they had seen Spencer shoot into the crowd that night. The witness was charged with stealing $26,000 worth of merchandise from his employer and was not sentenced because he agreed to perjury. The witness said, "I did not see Mr. Spencer leave the party and come back with a gun. I did not see Mr. Spencer shoot a gun into the crowd or at Mr. Hall. I only said that I saw Mr. Spencer come back with the gun because the DA prosecuting the case told me that she needed me to say those things, or else she could not make her case for premeditation. I did what the DA said because I was threatened by the detectives investigating the case, and by the DA prosecuting the case that if I did not say what they needed me to say, the DA would intervene in my own pending criminal case and cause me to be harmed or sentenced more severely." After this was revealed, a Free Brandon Spencer movement began, and 1,800 people signed the petition for Spencer to be released because he was innocent. An Instagram account was created, and the petition to free Brandon Spencer after he spent 10 years in jail is still ongoing. Brandon Spencer's case highlights the devastating impact of gang violence, but the horrors don't stop there. Jay Witt's story takes us down another dark path, a calculated crime driven by chilling motives.
Finding a man wanted for murder.
Take a look at him, 47-year-old Jay Witt. He faces a second-degree charge murder in the death of 48-year-old William Furlong. Police found his body at the Hells Angels headquarters at 27th and J last month.
On the 14th of July, 2013, a high-ranking member and a prospective member of the Hells Angels got into a fight at the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club building in Omaha, Nebraska. Jay Witt and William Furlong, both 48, were having a disagreement when Witt allegedly pulled out a gun and shot Furlong. Unfortunately for Witt, Furlong couldn't survive the inflicted wounds and was eventually found deceased. A warrant was issued for Witt's arrest. Investigators were then able to track Witt through the GPS in a vehicle he had stolen before arresting him around 2 weeks later. Following his arrest, Witt was charged with second-degree murder, as well as charges for the use of a weapon to commit a felony and possession of a weapon by a felon. In response to these charges, during his October 2014 trial, a judge found Mr. Witt guilty of the crimes. However, the second-degree murder charge had been dropped in favor of a manslaughter charge following an earlier guilty plea, which Witt made in exchange for the dropping of his murder charge. While in court, one detective testified that she had found Furlong's body lying face up near the bar area of the clubhouse. Another testified that surveillance footage from outside the clubhouse had shown a man similar to Witt enter into the clubhouse with his girlfriend at around 2:15 a.m., less than 3 hours before Furlong appeared. The video in case showed the man who resembled Witt and his girlfriend leave around 9:30 a.m. with a plastic bag before he's once again spotted, wiping down the door and door handles of a Chevy Cruze with towels before leaving in the vehicle. The woman in the video was identified in court to be Tammy Kozak, and she was charged with tampering of evidence and accessory to murder. And a sergeant in the court testified that she, along with Witt, had stopped at a gas station after they fled the scene before they drove to Harlan, Iowa, probably to get away from the center of the crime. During his court hearing, Witt maintained an ice-cold demeanor, just as you would expect from any Hell's Angel. But at the end, the judge sentenced Witt to 30 to 40 years in prison, of which the first 17 and a half must be served before he would be eligible for parole. Witt showed no emotions after listening to his sentence, and even reportedly claimed he did it out of self-defense. Furlong's wife was present in court and came to the defense of her deceased husband, saying he shouldn't be judged by his outward appearance. Witt sadly died in September 2019 at the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services, following a long battle with illness. He was 53 years old at the time, and state law required that a grand jury conducted an investigation into the situation.
Yeah, I'll see you all in hell, too. Remember that. Every one of you, I'll see you in hell.
Let's head to Hampden County Superior Court, where a dramatic scene unfolds when Caius Veiovis was to be sentenced for 3 counts of murder. Caius Demetrius Veiovis, real name Roy Gutfinski, was born in Augusta, Maine, and was a self-proclaimed vampire and Satanist with a bizarrely distinct look. His implanted head bumps would resemble horns, his reshaped earlobes, and his dozens of tattoos, including one on his forehead which reads 666, certainly don't paint the look of an angel. As far back as the year 1995, a 13-year-old Roy Gutfinski Jr., who had already developed a fascination for devil worship, was already getting into serious trouble with law enforcement. When he was 20, a prosecutor recommended that he be kept behind bars for as long as possible following a ritual bloodletting case with his then-girlfriend, which left a 16-year-old girl scarred for life. Gutfinski ended up serving a 7.5-year sentence for this. Gutfinski struggled with substance abuse from a very young age and was in and out of jail a lot between the late 90s and mid-2000s. He constantly referred to himself by the police as a vampire and began to alter his looks, which ultimately culminated in legally changing his name to Caius Veiovis after a vampire from the TV series Twilight in 2008. In 2011, 3 men, David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell, were found buried outside of Pittsfield, Massachusetts 10 days after they were reported missing. There were 3 suspects: 37-year-old Adam Lee Hall, 47-year-old David Chalou, and Caius Veiovis himself, who was 34 at the time. Prosecutors accused Veiovis of helping the other 2 men kidnap and shoot the victims in order to prevent them from testifying after they witnessed the death of Glasser, who himself was eliminated to prevent him from testifying in a case against Hall, who was a high-ranking member of the Massachusetts chapter of the Hells Angels. Veiovis' trial began nearly 3 years later in September 2014, as he was already pretty notorious at the time, so it was no surprise when a media frenzy erupted around the case due to his involvement in the case. During the trial, both Hall and Chalou were convicted of 3 counts of murder, kidnapping, and witness intimidation, and sentenced to life in prison. Veiovis was the last out of the 3 men to face trial, and he pleaded not guilty to all charges against him. Despite the various pieces of evidence which suggested his involvement in the murders, Veiovis' trial was a rather lengthy one and had to be moved 50 miles to Hampden County Superior Court in Springfield to avoid a biased jury. Veiovis tried to maintain his innocence for as long as possible, claiming that he had rejected all the plea deals offered to him from the beginning and that he'd rather do life than accept any of those deals. His court-appointed attorney, James Reardon, also accused the state of lacking concrete evidence against his client. After over 37 hours of deliberation spanning 6 days, the jury found Veiovis guilty of kidnapping, murdering the 3 men, and he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the option of parole.
As to each of the 3 counts of murder, impose a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole each.
And Veiovis' reaction to the jury's verdict was something you could have expected. "I'll see you all in hell. Remember that."
Yeah, I'll see you all in hell, too. Remember that. Every one of you, I'll see you in hell.
He also revealed that he was going to appeal the verdict to the state Supreme Court. Veiovis, meanwhile, is currently completing his term at Gardner, Massachusetts, North Central Correctional Institution.
Hells Angels just shot at Vagos. There's 2 down.
Let's head to Henderson, Las Vegas, where things escalated into attempted murder on a local highway between 2 rival motorcycle gangs. It was a Memorial Day Sunday morning on the 29th of May, 2022, when members of the Vagos outlaw motorcycle gang were shot at on a highway while riding back from a Memorial Day event in Boulder City. The perpetrators? Some members of the Hells Angel Motorcycle Club, of course. Police were able to arrest 3 of the suspects, 66-year-old Richard Rizzo DeVries, along with 46-year-old Stephen Allo and 26-year-old Russell Smith. DeVries was eventually identified as the president of the Hells Angels Las Vegas chapter, one of the most powerful chapters of the club, while the other 2 were said to be Hells Angels prospects. Police reports recounted that while the Vagos members were trying to participate in the prior event, a group of 5 Hells Angels members were seen riding around and followed them till they began to cause problems during the event. They also reportedly left the event about 20 minutes before the Vagos members began riding towards Henderson, where they waited to ambush the Vagos gang. The result was injuries to 6 of the Vagos bikers and a closure of the highway for several hours, as the police conducted an investigation while the injured bikers were transported to a local hospital for treatment. Investigators, in collaboration with the Las Vegas Met Police Department's Criminal Intelligence Unit, were able to identify the 3 suspects using surveillance footage, as well as civilian footage of the shooting. This ultimately led to the June arrest of DeVries and the other 2 men who were booked into the Henderson Detention Center on the charges of 6 counts of attempted murder with a deadly weapon, a single count of conspiracy to commit murder with a deadly weapon, 6 counts of battery with the use of a deadly weapon causing substantial harm, 6 counts of discharging a gun at or into an occupied structure or vehicle, with the latter 2 charges labeled to have occurred with a criminal gang enhancement. 5 additional Hells Angels were also indicted by a second Clark County grand jury in connection with the incident, and additional charges included attempted murder, racketeering, as well as harboring concealed weapons. A Las Vegas former special agent, Aaron Rouse, suggested that the arrests could lead up to a federal prosecution for the Hells Angels on RICO charges based on the group's activities. That kind of thing has the potential to dissolve the Hells Angels Las Vegas chapter. DeVries was able to post bail following his indictment by the Clark County grand jury. His court appearance was set for the 24th of August, 2022, where he appeared with his attorney, Richard Schoenfeld. But on the 3rd of October 2022, he was rearrested and taken back into custody on additional felony charges, which included racketeering. In the court, he showed a cool and calm demeanor, as if to suggest to the court that he had it all under control. This time, 8th District Court Judge Tiara Jones ordered DeVries to be held on a $250,000 bond, which he once again posted. During a separate court hearing set on March 31, 2023, which involved all the other suspects, DeVries' attorney, Richard Schoenfeld, suggested that the evidence used to indict the Hells Angels members was insufficient. He also claimed that Vagos members had concealed weapons during the incident, and that police at the scene had examined some of their handguns only to return them. As a result, the judge instructed prosecutors to revise the indictment. On Monday, May 1, 2023, Clark County District Judge Tiara Jones decided that the 7 alleged Hells Angels members would not be facing racketeering or gang charges for their involvement in the highway shooting, which left a total of 7 people injured. During the hearing, Judge Jones also reduced the number of shooting counts from 25 to 5 in the case against the defendants, including Richard DeVries. DeVries' attorney, Richard Schoenfeld, revealed his pleasure at the judge's ruling, claiming that the initial indictment was too broad and had to be revised. DeVries, along with the other 6 men, which now include Cameron Treach, Aaron Chun, and Ryan Molasco, still face prosecution on charges of attempted murder, battery, and assault with weapons. And even though they've all pleaded not guilty to the charges, they each face up to 40 years in prison if convicted. A trial date has been set for the 28th of May, 2024, a day short of the 2-year anniversary of the incident. For now, the 7 men, including Richard DeVries, are free, but they could be facing the same fate as others on this list by the time you watch this video.
The case has been described as the biggest and most complex gang prosecution in the province. During the trial, 6 state witnesses were murdered.
George Joel Thomas, notorious as the leader of the feared 28s gang in Bishop Lavis, found himself at the center of the country's largest gang trial, accused of orchestrating killings and ordering assassinations while he was locked up in prison. In a trial where only 1 out of 18 accused was acquitted of all charges, all testimonies pointed at Thomas's involvement. One witness recounted the gang's attempt to assassinate Curtis Esterhuizen, a member of the rival Clever Kids gang who survived a shootout on April 14, 2008. The very next day, police caught 3 individuals, including George Thomas, after a shooting incident in Bishop Lavas. Thomas was allegedly found in the back of a bakkie, armed with a rifle equipped with a telescopic sight and silencer, while others carried a box of ammunition in the front. But the terror surrounding Esther Hewson's life didn't end there. On September 8, 2008, a third incident occurred where shots were fired on the street where Esther Hewson resided, paralyzing one person. Tragically, during a fourth attempt on November 23, 2008, Marvin Esther Hewson lost his life simply because he was mistaken for his brother Curtis by attackers. Despite surviving a point-blank shot to the head on November 2, 2009, Curtis Esther Hewson declined the offer of witness protection, only to meet his demise 5 months later while riding his bicycle in Bishop Lavas. The 28's gang was regarded as a criminal enterprise operating under the leadership of George Jewel Thomas of the Cape Flats. Seated beside him in the dock was Ashraf Arab Rycliffe, a leader of the 26's gang, known for their bloody turf wars with the 28's. Despite the rivalry, it was alleged that the two gangs conspired to eliminate the father of a key witness in the trial, Cecil Barnes. Tragically, Barnes was fatally shot in his kitchen in Bishop Lavas on October 16, 2010. Despite the dangers posed by his involvement in the trial, Cecil Barnes chose not to accept the state's offer of witness protection, standing firm alongside his son, Regan Barnes, in their pursuit of justice. The indictment against Jewel Thomas listed a staggering array of charges, including 19 counts of murder, 29 attempted murders, extortion, racketeering, incitement, conspiracy, theft, robbery, and possession of firearms and ammunition. The state planned to summon 370 witnesses, with several of them placed under witness protection for their safety. But several state witnesses met untimely deaths, allegedly on orders from Thomas while he was still in prison since his 2008 arrest.
During the trial, 6 state witnesses were murdered, allegedly on Thomas's instructions while he was incarcerated.
According to many, Thomas was responsible, all while being locked up in his prison cell. One chilling instance of allegation is that Thomas ordered the assassination of Andrew Williams over a phone call from inside a cell at the Delft police station on May 5, 2008. And in May 2015, George Jewel Thomas received life sentences for each of the 7 murders for which he was convicted. Despite all the lives he took and the families he destroyed, Thomas maintained a smug demeanor, his arrogance palpable even as the weight of justice bore down upon him. He was found guilty on a staggering 53 charges, including 7 counts of murder, 2 of racketeering, and multiple other serious offenses. The convictions spanned a series of gruesome crimes, with Thomas held accountable for the deaths of individuals such as Angelo Klassen, Glenston Martin, Uzrea Abrahams, Haywin Stridham, Cecil Barnes, Gresham Boyson, and Nadine Davids, each tragedy leaving a deep scar on the communities affected. Accompanying Thomas were 16 co-accused, all facing a multitude of charges amounting to 166 in total, encompassing murder, attempted murder, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit crimes. His co-defendants, sharing the dock with him, also remained stoic in the face of their convictions. Our next case of the Carpio brothers is almost like it's out of a blockbuster gang movie.
2 gang members were sentenced today for killing a teenager on a high school campus in the Valley.
In the late afternoon of April 24, 2013, Antonio and Michael Stephen Carpio, known as the Rockwoods, due to their affiliation with the Rampart area street gang with the same name, arrived at Cleveland High School to pick up their 15-year-old brother, George, who was a student. Raised in Los Angeles, the Carpio brothers had been initiated into one of the notorious Rockwood street gangs in the Westlake area, which led their family to move to Panorama City in hopes of distancing themselves from the grip of gang life. It's speculated that one or both of the assailants may have also attended Cleveland High at some point, according to accounts from students. It was during this visit to the school that they encountered Kevin Orellana, a former student who still visited the campus to play handball with his friends. Orellana, an 18-year-old known for his athleticism and agility, was also called La Pulga, in English, the Flea, for his small stature and lightning-fast reflexes as a soccer goalie. Despite having graduated from Reseda High School a year prior, Orellana continued to spend time at Cleveland High while attending the West Valley Occupational Center in Woodland Hills to complete his high school education.
As a parent, we plan to dance at their wedding, celebrate a promotion, look forward to possible grandchildren. The last thought we would ever have is that we will have to plan their funeral.
Kevin Orellana of North Hollywood aspired to be a rapper, with plans to pursue enrollment in Cal State Northridge's esteemed kinesiology program as a backup. Despite his shaved head and numerous tattoos, Orellana staunchly distanced himself from gang affiliations, a fact reiterated by both Doerbeker and his family members. But his encounter with the Carpio brothers made everything crash. As the elder Carpio asked Orellana where he was from, insinuating gang ties, Orellana firmly denied any such association, saying that he belonged to no gang. The altercation escalated swiftly, with the taller Carpio initiating physical violence. Yet Orellana, despite his smaller stature, quickly gained the upper hand. But the confrontation took a tragic turn when the younger Carpio brother brandished a knife from his pocket and delivered 2 fatal stab wounds to Orellana's chest. Afterward, the Carpio brothers quickly fled the scene, with members of the Cleveland football team in pursuit. Despite efforts to catch them, the brothers managed to escape to a maroon minivan. Orellana was quickly transported to Northridge Hospital Medical Center, but it was too late to save him. Medical examination revealed a fatal stab wound piercing his heart, sealing his untimely demise and leaving a community reeling in shock and grief. Upon arriving at the crime scene, the police documented every detail. Among the array of evidence, they noted the remnants of the victim's clothing and traced a trail of blood and red stains on the asphalt, which suggested a frantic escape. One notable detail that caught the police's attention was a water bottle belonging to a teacher who tried to help the victim. But it was the unwavering courage of the student witnesses that left a lasting impression. Despite the looming threat of retaliation in a gang-affiliated case, these young individuals stood firm, eager to provide invaluable testimony. One particular student provided key details, linking one of the suspects to a distinctive tattoo often seen on campus, ultimately leading to the identification of Michael Carpio. Following their apprehension at their residence in Panorama City, the Carpio brothers offered varying accounts on the events leading up to the fatal stabbing. Michael Carpio claimed that Orellana had provoked him with a threatening glare, while Anthony initially denied involvement before eventually conceding to being present on the campus. But when pressed for a motive behind the stabbing, Anthony's response remained cryptic. In the end, Anthony Carpio of Panorama City and his brother, Michael Steve Carpio, from Pacoima, were found guilty on October 31, 2015, of second-degree murder in connection with the tragic death of Kevin Orellana. Anthony, who was 16 years old at the time of the fatal incident when he wielded a knife and inflicted multiple stab wounds upon Orellana, received a sentence of 16 years to life in prison. Meanwhile, his older brother Michael, who was an adult at the time of the April 24, 2013 killing and was reportedly unarmed during the attack, was sentenced to 15 years to life behind bars. This case serves as a tragic reminder that the mentality of gang members can have a devastating impact on the innocent. If the Carpio brothers hadn't gotten involved with their gang at such young ages, Kevin Orellana would be alive today. Now, we're going all the way to Springfield, where a Latin King member is facing first-degree murder charges.
Charged with robbery, drug crimes, and other offenses. A spokesperson for the district attorney's office, Jim Lydon, told 22 News another defendant, Jonathan Guevara, was also charged with the murder of 18-year-old Lopez.
The discovery of 18-year-old Latin King member Kenneth Lopez's body on March 25, 2015, sent shockwaves through the city's north end. Found in the yard of a house at Dwight and Calhoun Streets, Lopez had succumbed to fatal gunshot wounds sustained overnight. The perpetrator behind this was revealed to be a 25-year-old Latin King member, Lee Rios. Following the murder, Rios stockpiled ammunition and firearms as he believed that the gang would seek retribution for his actions. The murder of Kenneth Lopez was not a spur-of-the-moment act, but rather a meticulously planned and aggressively pursued crime. Rios himself orchestrated the murder with calculated precision with the help of fellow Latin Kings members. Despite both Lopez and Rios being affiliated with the Latin Kings, their relationship had soured, leading to a falling out between them. In an attempt to reconcile their differences, Rios devised a plan to lure Lopez from his residence under the guise of resolving a personal conflict. But his intentions proved futile, and it culminated in a tragic and fatal outcome. On February 7, 2017, Lee Rios faced the consequences of his actions as he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he listened to the judge reading the verdict, Rios' demeanor was quite calm for someone who just found out that they will be spending the rest of their lives behind bars. The horrific actions of these gang members have left deep scars on families and communities, their courtroom reactions only emphasizing the cold and senseless nature of their crimes. While justice has been served, the pain remains for those affected. But this is only the beginning. The next video on screen will take you further into the world of chilling cases and the shocking sentences that continue to leave us speechless. Keep watching.